Hi, my name is Janet, and I am an alcoholic. Emotional sobriety. I think I think that many oldsters will put our AA booze cure to severe but successful tests. Hold on. Still find they often lack emotional sobriety. Perhaps they will be the spearhead for the next major development in AA, the development of much more real maturity and balance, which is to say, humility in our relations with ourselves, with our fellows, and with God. Those adolescent urges that so many of us have for top approval, perfect security, and perfect romance, urges quite appropriate to age 17, prove to be an impossible way of life when we are at age 47 and 57. Since AA began, I've taken immense wallops in all these areas because of my failure to grow up emotionally and spiritually. My God, how painful it is to keep demanding the impossible, and how very painful to discover finally that all along we've had the cart before the horse. Then comes the final agony of seeing how awfully wrong we've been, but still finding ourselves unable to get off the emotional merry-go-round. How to translate a right mental conviction into a right emotional result, and so into easy, happy, and good living. Well, that's not only the neurotic's problem, it's the problem of life itself for all of us who have got to the point of real willingness to hew to right principles in all our affairs. Even then, as we hew away, peace and joy may still elude us. That's the place so many of us AA oldsters have come to. And it's a hell of a spot, literally. How shall our unconscious, from which so many of our fears, compulsions, and phony aspirations still stream, be brought into line with what we actually believe, know, and want? How to convince our dumb, raging, and hidden Mr. Hyde becomes our main task. I've recently come to believe this can be achieved. I believe so because I begin to see many benighted ones, folks like you and me, commencing to get results. Last autumn, depression, having no really rational cause at all, almost took me to the cleaners. I began to be scared that I was in for another long chronic spell. Considering the grief I've had with depressions, it wasn't a bright prospect. I kept asking myself, why can't the 12 steps work to release depression? By the hour, I stared at the St. Francis prayer. It's better to comfort than to be comforted. It was the formula, all right, but why didn't it work? Suddenly, I realized what the matter was. My basic flaw had always been dependence, almost absolute dependence on people or circumstances to supply me with prestige, security, and the like. Failing to get these things according to my perfectionist dreams and specifications, I had fought for them. And when defeat came, so did my depression. There wasn't a chance of making the outgoing love of St. Francis a workable and joyous way of life until these fatal and almost absolute dependencies were cut away. Because I had, over the years, undergone a little spiritual development, the absolute quality of these frightful dependencies had never been before been so starkly revealed. Reinforced by what grace I could secure in prayer, I found I had to exert every ounce of will and action to cut off these faulty emotional dependencies upon people, upon AA, indeed upon any act of circumstance whatsoever. Then only could I be free to love as St. Francis did. Emotional and instinctual satisfactions, I saw, were really the extra dividends of having love, offering love, and expressing love appropriate to each relation of life. Plainly, I could not avail myself to God's love until I was able to offer it back to Him by loving others as He would have me. And I couldn't possibly do that so long as I was victimized by false dependencies. For my dependence meant demand, a demand for the possession and control of the people and the conditions surrounding me. While those words absolute dependence may look like a gimmick, they were the ones that helped me to trigger my release into my present degree of stability and quietness of mind, qualities which I am now trying to consolidate by offering love to others, regardless of the return to me. This seems to be the primary healing circuit, an outgoing love of God's creation and his people, by means of which we avail ourselves of his love for us. It is most clear that the real current can flow until our paralyzing dependencies are broken, and broken at depth. Only then can we possibly have a glimmer of what adult love really is. If we examine every disturbance we have, great or small, we will find at the root of it some unhealthy dependence and its consequent demand. Let us, with God's help, continually surrender these hobbling demands. Then we can be set free to live and love. We may then be able to gain emotional sobriety. Of course, I haven't offered you a really new idea, only a gimmick that has started to unhook several of my own hexes at depth. Nowadays, my brain no longer races compulsively in either elation, grandiosity, or depression. I have been given a quiet place in bright sunshine. But Wilson.
Thank you so much, Janet. Janet was put on the spot. This is her first time here, and she was the first person in the room, and I asked if she had the essay, and she happened to have it like within reach. So thank you, Janet. Wow, so tonight I am so excited to introduce our speaker, and I'm just so grateful that he was available and willing to do this for us. The first time I heard Don was in this meeting. I think it was last year, and very brand new in sobriety. And I have to say that one talk completely changed the course of my life. And I'll spare you all the details because I know you'd rather hear from him, as would I. But I am just so grateful that he is in our midst and he is here. And are you ready, Don? You're muted. Here, I can unmute you.
Here we go.
Oh, there you go.
My name is Don Coyas. I am a member of the Mohican Nation. Our tribe is a matriarchal community, and it's a clan system. So I was born for the Turtle Clan on my mother's side, and my Indian name is Tantankawambli. That name was given to me by the elders when I was given a responsibility to be the keeper of a hoop of 100 eagle feathers. There's something been in our culture for that it was told it was going to be coming for about 400 years. And so I was given that responsibility. And always kind of what I like to do to get things going is I always like to light a little bit of sage. Primarily helps me, I guess, get over my jitters or whatever it is. So I will light some sage. And in our culture, what we believe is that the smoke comes out in this, the spirit comes out in the smoke. And when we light it, then that spirit comes out. And then the spirit, it knows no distance. Whatever happens here happens there instantaneously. And so what the sage is about is to help us to connect with each other. And it kind of helps us to remove any negative things that are around. So I'll take this feather and I put this medicine comes out on the feather, and then I swoop this feather like this, and then it goes all around everywhere. And I was taught by my grandpa to start things, in that manner. So I want to thank you for allowing me to, to do that. And just maybe that will help me get going here. I have 9 children altogether, and out of those 9 children, I have 20 grandkids, and I have one great grandchild. And of my 20 grandchildren, 19 of them are all sober and don't use drugs or alcohol. We got one that's just kind of getting into recovery, around that. So we're pretty pleased with that. I think one of the reasons I got sober was I wasn't trying to get sober. I was beyond giving a crap. I didn't care anymore. And so I know that my family was praying for me. And I think I learned a little bit later on that I had some intervention from God, the creator, I call him. And I didn't really I didn't feel anything that my relatives were doing. I know they were praying, and I didn't sense anything God was doing. The thing that made me realize something was going on was at that time, my wife, she went to Al-Anon. And I was kind of glad she would take off out of the house one way and I go to the bar the other way. And it seemed to be really cool. But I remember the weekend that she went to an Al-Anon meeting, and when she come home, she caught on to what Al-Anon was about. And it altered my life like you can't believe. It was just scary what she learned from those people that just really changed my life. So that was the most recognizable thing that I knew that there was help coming. It was from Al-Anon, and I'm grateful for Al-Anon for for doing so. And I was raised on a reservation in Wisconsin, and my dad was he was a hardcore alcoholic. He was drinking a lot when we were all growing up, and when he was drinking, he was violent. He had tendencies to be really violent. And so we would watch out the window, and if he wasn't home by 5:30, we knew he was out drinking, and we knew it was going to be hell to pay when he did come home. And I have a lot of memories of him beating up my mom and all that stuff that went on with that. And he was raised in something called a boarding school. It was a governmental boarding school, and I didn't know all what happened to him, but he punished us like he was punished in the boarding school. So I just kind of grew up with that. And so there was a lot of fear in our family, a lot of secrets. Nobody told anything what was going on in our family. And by the time I was 9 and 10, I was sexually abused by an uncle for a couple of years. And then there was a beer party on our reservation. He was up there drinking, and a fight broke out, and somebody shot him 6 times. So he died. And that was my mother's most favorite brother. And so when he got killed, I was so happy. And I always had this funny conflict going on. I was happy and I hated to see how sad she was, that kind of stuff as a kid, goes through. And then I never drank alcohol till I was 18. But the first bottle of beer I had that effect like the big book talks about. I couldn't believe that I could change so much from one little bottle of beer. And then from there, I got into relationships and got married, had a couple of children at first, and started, I guess that saying is a man takes a drink, then a drink takes a drink, then a drink takes the man. And that was my journey. By the time I was 33, my life was so complicated. I was in the middle of divorce and thousands of dollars in debt and trouble with the law and cops and children and cars and all that crazy stuff. And we got to the point where I didn't give a crap no more. And then lo and behold, by some coincidences, I run into you guys. I run into AA. And I remember our first meeting, I didn't tell anybody I was gonna go. I was gonna go see what it was about. And I remember I went and I scoped it out, what that meeting was like and or where it was. And it was a real wide street. It was in Colorado Springs, and all the cars parked diagonal. And there was one slot right in front of that AA door. So I drove around the block and I said, okay, if that slot's there, I said, I'm going to go in. So I drove around and that slot was empty. And people were coming to the meeting, but it seemed like they parked on the other side. So I said, I'm going to go around one more time. If that slot is still really empty, then I'm going to go in. And it was empty. So I went in. And I got up that steps and I remember I looked in the door and to see what it was like. And there I'd never been to a meeting before. And I says, oh my God, there's all white people in there. I couldn't believe there's just all these old guys sitting in there. And I thought, these white people ain't going to teach me nothing. So I started to leave and they had a greeter there, a big old guy. And it seemed like it was like he had one of these shepherd hooks or something like that. He hooked that thing around my neck. He slapped a cup of coffee in my hand and shoved me into that darn meeting. And I sat there at that table. And I remember I said, I'm not going to tell him nothing. I ain't going to say anything. I don't care what. And so the meeting went around there. And I remember there were some things irritated me. One was as these guys spoke, they were always telling on themselves. They were talking about their anger and self-pity and so, all this stuff. And where I come from, guys never told on yourself because that was a sign of weakness, I guess. And then the other thing really irritated me was their laughter. Somebody would say something and they just had this belly laugh, knee slap, and it drove me crazy because there was nothing funny. And here these guys just laughing, But then there was a third thing that happened there that it took me about a year to figure it out, but there was a feeling in there. And I had no idea what the hell I got from these white guys, but there's this feeling in there. And later on, I was to find out that that's that feeling that you get when you come home for the first time. It's that feeling when you find your family, when you find that feeling where you belong. That's what that feeling was. But I didn't know about that right away. I only knew I wanted to come back and have that feeling again. And so I came back and pretty soon I started to catch on to that. There was a book called A Big Book, and there's such a thing as a sponsor, and you probably was a good idea to have you one of these sponsors to, get things going. And that was kind of familiar to me because in our tribe, the young ones, you always had to have an elder in your life, to kind of guide you and stuff. So that was kind of familiar to me. And so I run into you guys and I kept going back to these meetings and I didn't know if I was going to stay in those meetings or not. But then this sponsor that I worked with, he started to lead me through the 12 steps of AA. And I had this secret agreement with myself when I started working in the steps. I said, I'm going to go through step 5. And if I don't personally can't tell something's changing, I ain't going to go no more. But I'll do what they say for that length of time. And so when I did the work and I did, the prayer, turned my life over and wrote inventory. And I told everything in inventory. And I did 5th step it. A little trouble doing some of that. But when I was told to go home to review those proposals, and I was to then look at the 5th step promises. And so I went home and I did that. And I remember I was told, read the promises. And if you have met the condition, all promises in the big book, they say has a condition. You got to meet the condition, you get the promise. And it was withholding nothing, then you get the spiritual cookie, I guess. And so when I went through the line by line and I read that thing, and for the first time that I can never remember in my life, I held my head high. I wasn't walking around with guilt and shame, and something, went on in there. And it went on like it wasn't like no lights or nothing, but I was just sitting out in this chair and kind of letting things happen. And at that time, I had tried so many times to quit drinking. Hundreds of games and tryings and promises and broken. And no matter what I did, I was not able to quit, except I wasn't drinking. And so when I got done with that afternoon, I made a vow to myself. I said, what I'm going to do is I'll make these 12 steps my way of life. I ain't going to do nothing else. If somebody gives me something fancy to do, if I can't reconcile it in these 12 steps, I ain't doing it. Because I finally found something I wasn't drinking. I didn't want to add nothing to what I had there because that thing was working, So anyway, I went through that, and my first sponsor, Frank McKibben, his name was, he was a big book thumping guy. Boy, there was a big book, and he got mad at AA one time, and he took his group underground in his basement for 7 years. They went through the book, and he wouldn't let nobody else come in there except that group that he chose to go through that work. And you know how they say when the hand of AA reaches out, you're supposed to. He didn't invite nobody. He says, "My damn house. I can invite here who I want." And that group went underground for 7 years, and the local AA people, we always give nicknames to everything. Anyway, they call them the God Squad. And that was kind of the joke. Everybody knew, who the God Squad was. Then they surfaced and they started sponsoring people. And that was my first experience going through the work, was through somebody who had been underground like that for 7 years, with the God Squad. So he took me through the work. And then next I run into a guy named Don Pritz. He was in Denver at that time. And I always call Frank was my head sponsor, and Frank, he was my heart sponsor. That's how they both were big book guys, but they just saw, the things a little bit different. And so I went through with him. And then I got about 3.5 years sober. I went kind of crazy. My meetings got stupid, sponsors got stupid. I couldn't read the book. I couldn't do 11 step. And I felt I was going to drink. That's how it seemed to me. I just, even my kids were saying, by then I had my family back, and my kids were saying, "Dad, you need a meeting." And so anyway, I went and I run into this old Indian guy. His name was Johnny Looking Cloud. He'd been sober a long time. And so I went and I asked him for help. And he said, "We've been watching you for a long time." And he said, "Most of us thought you wasn't going to make it." He said, "We can kind of tell sometimes people come in and when they're angry and they walk out of meetings and they're stupid and whatever." He said, "We didn't think you would make it," but he said, "You did." So he said, the program's working. But then he went on to say, he said, "There's been something missing for you." And I said, "Well, what's that?" And he said, "You think that this is a white man's program. That's how you call it." And he said, "This is not a white man's program." And he said, Johnny Looking Cloud, he was a very traditional man. He knew a lot of the old ways of the Indian people of his tribe, but he also was a staunch Catholic. He really was he did all the moves, with the Catholics that he did, but he didn't see them as two different things. The way his spirituality was, he just said, the Bible is earthly stories, spiritual stories with Indian meanings. That's how he would talk about stuff. He always had everything integrated to be really cool. So anyway, he said, "What's missing for you is," he said, you gotta add the culture, the way your grandpa told you," he said. And so for him, I think my first turning point in the program was when I went through down with Don Pritz, and I learned this love stuff that he talked about. And then when I went through with Johnny Cloud, when he started to show me how to use the culture, and so he had me take the 12 steps and put them in a circle. He says, we're circle people. The earth goes in a circle, the moon goes around a circle, the sun goes around a circle. All of our teachings goes in a circle. So he put steps 1, 2, 3 in the east, and that was like finding your relationship with your higher power, your creator, like a new day, new beginning. Then as the sun goes all the way across the sky, then in the south was steps 4, 5, and 6. That's where you find your relationship with yourself, you know, your strengths and weaknesses through the inventory, etc. 7, 8, 9 is like sunset. That's where you go make your amends. And you connect now with your relatives. And then 10, 11, 12 in the north, he said, now you're in harmony with the teachings of the earth. That's what these 12 steps are. They're principles. And the earth is made of principles. And he said, the salmon have their principles, the moose has their principles, the dandelion its principles, and we have ours. And there's 12 of them. And he said, this is how the old way, how we lived in harmony, with the earth. And so I was taught then that I was to go through this work every year. And so I'm 43 years sober. I've been through the work 39 times. I didn't go through every year, but I've gone through 39 times through the work. And what I was taught very young was they said, when you first go through the work, it's like you make this little circle of yellow clarity. You walk around in there and you think you know everything, and then you go through the work, and then that circle gets a little bit bigger, and now you're more responsible and you do other things, and you go through the work again, that circle gets bigger, then pretty soon you're sponsoring people, and all that kind of stuff. Then he said, surrounding that circle, this is where God is. In our language, we don't say God. What we say is a great mystery. That's how the word is. So surrounding that circle of light is the mystery. And so what they always taught me was when it's time to go through this work, you walk to the edge of the yellow and you go forward to step 1, not backwards to step 1, but you go forward to step 1. And so that's what I did. I went go forward and I do that work again to see, is the magic still there? Is there still something, that you get to learn? Then I guess it was, you talked about a year or so ago, I was asked to be in this emotional sobriety thing. And I wasn't really familiar with it. I tried to find out from Kurt, what was going on, and he helped me a lot. And so anyway, I listed a couple of the meetings, and to hear what was going on. And I didn't understand everything what they read with Bill Wilson. I didn't know he wrote that article. And then as this started to sink in, this thing around emotional sobriety, I started to there were things that triggered, I guess. And one of them was I was just kind of reflecting on longer term sobriety. How about that? Because Bill Wilson kind of talked about longer term sobriety and stuff like that. And he talked about maturity and dependency. And I guess I was just in a spot in the seasons. Maybe it was a winter time for me when I just was reflecting and questioning and asking and trying to let stuff flow in, because I had no idea for sure what does the emotional sobriety mean, even though I'd attended some of those meetings and listened to Bill Wilson's type of thing. And so I went to see the elders, and I know some Native elders have been sober a long time, and they know the culture and they know, the other things. And what we have to do is we make it's called a tobacco tie. You take a little red cloth and then you put tobacco in it, and then you tie it into like a little bundle. And so the protocol is you take this tobacco tie, you give it to an elder. Then if they take it, then it means they're going to work with you. They'll answer your question or whatever. So I made this tobacco tie and I started talking to these elders. And I was saying, I said, did you ever hear of emotional sobriety? No, and they said, yeah, we know, but about emotional sobriety, what that is and everything. And then I go to another one, and more discussions took place. And then by then I had learned about putting the steps in a circle, and I learned about we travel in seasons and cycles, and all this stuff that. And I was always careful about, is this gonna match the 12 steps? So if somebody says, oh, I run into this new thing, it's 7 habits of this. If I can't reconcile it in the steps, I don't do it, And so that's just my way, my vow that I agreed that I would do. And so one of them told me, he said, if you want to find emotional sobriety, he said, let me tell you how we raised the baby. How did our people grow a long time ago? Because we grew into warriors, and we grew into all kinds of things. It's not that we didn't have problems; we had problems, but they're talking about they learned somehow from nature on how they were supposed to grow, and so I listened to them, and what they talked about was this is, first of all, you need to know how the human being grows. We grow in 4 directions: emotional, mental, physical, spiritual. So you can go in the big book, that's all in there: emotional, mental, physical, spiritual. So I knew, this was probably okay. And then what I learned was this thing with the emotional, mental, physical, spiritual, what that really equates to is a thought or a belief. A belief has 4 parts. A thought has 4 parts. One part of a thought will always be an emotion with it: happy, sad, glad, angry, upset, whatever. But there's always an emotion with it. Then that emotion will be connected to a mental picture. So you got like a movie camera going on inside of your head. You got this picture. Then that is triggered by a language or words. So you have a language that describes the mental picture, that describes the emotion. Then behind that, there's a spiritual meaning, a spiritual intent. So you say the words and you have the mental picture and you have this emotion, the spirit tells you whether you mean it or not. So I can say I love you, and then I can mean that. But if I say I love you at closing time in a bar, the odds are not very good. I mean it. I got some other kind of motive going on inside of my head, something like that. So there's always this spirit behind whether you mean it or whether you don't. Then the other thing to understand, I think, emotional is some of us are born with brown eyes, some are blonde hair, different hairs. Well, when we learn to think, we're not all the same. Some people, the way they turn out, they're emotions people. Now they have this the words, the pictures, the feelings, and all that, but you can tell that they're emotions, feelings people, because when you talk to them, they'll always say, well, that doesn't feel right to me. Oh yeah, that feels really good to me. So they always talk about how stuff feels like this, but they have a mental picture, they have the words, and they have the spirit intent. But not everybody is that way. So there's some people, they're more the mental people, they're the visionaries. So they don't feel like a feelings person does. What they do is they see it. So you can tell they're vision people, mental people, because you talk to them and they'll always say, I see what you're saying. So they always talk about how they see, what you're saying. Then you have the third person is with the ear. So that's the words person. They don't necessarily visualize, they don't feel, but they say, I'm just very excited about this project that you mentioned, and I'm in full support. They don't like get no big excitement going, you know. That's the way that they are. And so, can you imagine like you get two alcoholic people together, one's a feelings person, one's a vision person, and they're trying to solve a problem. You know, one is saying, talk, 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 you see what I'm saying? The other one says, well, that don't feel right to me. And it's got nothing to do with feelings. I mean, can't you see it? So when we take a look at emotional sobriety, all three of those can have emotional sobriety. It isn't just, that word doesn't just mean to me the feelings part. It's just a name of how it talks. People who think different, do they have this sobriety? Then the thing about this emotional, mental, physical, spiritual, the way the elders said is the four of those, they're all interconnected. So if your emotions, say, gets high and you get angry, then what happens? Your body will tense up, and then your words are like anger words. So whatever happens to one happens to the other. They're interacting, you see, all the time with each other. And what the elders said is part of the emotional sobriety is that you learn to balance all four of those directions that you learn after a while. I used to solve all my problems with negative emotions, anger, self-pity, depression, and that's how getting even. That was my way of life. I had emotions, but they're all the negative ones. Then I come to you guys and you show me there's another way how to solve those with more positive emotions. You know, you're talking about acceptance and forgiveness and all these other crazy things, you know, that I never thought had anything to do with solving problems. But then when you showed me how you did that, then all of a sudden I started trying it and my life changed. I wasn't around getting resentments and all that other stuff, you know, like I was before. So then what I decided to do under guidance was what they said was the cycle of life, baby, youth, adult, and elder. When we're a baby, we start to grow. We grow in a 4-year cycle: spring, summer, fall, winter, and then you're 4 years old. Spring, summer, fall, winter, then you're 8. Spring, summer, fall, winter, then you're 12. So we grow in a 4-year cycle, and in those time frames, there's certain things that you need to learn. There's certain things that you need to experience. The salmon, it's got everything it's supposed to do right in his head. It doesn't need to go to a salmon school or be taught by Mama Salmon. It knows. Swim out to the ocean, you hang out 4 years, got to swim back to the river where you was born. You can't go to any river. Then you got to swim up that river and lay your eggs. That salmon, every salmon knows it's supposed to do that. So all the flowers, everything is like that. But we human beings, we're different. We don't have all that knowledge of what we're supposed to do. We have to be taught. And so this is the cycle of life. So when I look at how I was raised, we weren't raised by the cycle of life. We were raised by trying to stay the hell out of my dad's way. And all that other crazy stuff that went with it. So I want to go through very quickly what these 8 feelings are in the cycle of life. And if my staff taught me really this afternoon how to do this, I'm going to share a PowerPoint very quickly. Host disabled screen sharing. Maybe I'm not going to do that. So anyway, when a baby is in the womb, they feel safe. It's just cool and there's water and it feels protected and it just really thinks it's got, then comes aware of life and sound and all this crazy stuff. So when that baby comes out and is on now ready for being the earth, the earth and how it works is it's all developed around relationships, and it's designed as an interconnected system and it's built around trust. Now, the bird is designed to fly, so it's supposed to do that. The fish is designed to swim, it's supposed to do that. The human is designed to trust. That's how we're supposed to be, because the bear wakes up, it goes by the river, and it trusts that the salmon's going to be coming up in the next couple of days. Pretty soon, here comes the salmon. And if you give it a little thought, the whole universe has synchronicity on seasons and cycles and timing and things and food, and it grows up, and you know when to plant and how it's going to come out, you know, all those things like that. So when we come into the life form, the first thing we're supposed to develop is the world is a good place and man, I belong in it. That's a feeling you're supposed to have when you come in there. The world is a good place and I fit and I belong in it. Like in our culture years ago, in my tribe, for example, when the baby was born, what the Turtle Clan did was about 2 hours after a baby was born, 2 elders from the Turtle Clan would come over, and first they would give that baby to the female elder, and she would tell that baby the story of life for 12 years or 3 seasons. Everything's supposed to know. It would just like explain it. And here this baby's a couple hours old. Then she would turn that child to the male elder, and he would tell their story from 12 until changing worlds or death. And so then the next morning, when the mom would be getting the baby ready, she would tell that baby a little bit of that story. And the second day, she would tell more. And then 3 months later, there'd be a little bit added to that story. And so she was always being told about the cycle of life. So the first 4 years, the parents did no discipline. When that baby messed up, they had the terrible tools, but when they messed up, grandma did the discipline because that baby had to develop a sense of trust. And if the parent was telling it things and correcting it and hugging it and correcting it, it wouldn't have that sense of trust. So in the old days, this is what they did. You need a sense of trust. So it's a feeling that you get. Now I'm going to describe very briefly 8 feelings, then I'll give you a place to look at a videotape that tells you the details, more of it as we talk about what we're doing here. Then the second feeling you're supposed to get is one called independence, autonomy. And how you get that feeling is, you ever notice the 2 most favorite words of a 2-year-old is no, They like revolt from the parents. That 2-year-old would be a perfect teenager if they could just drive a car, but they can't. They just drive you nuts. Now, they're supposed to do that because they're getting a feeling of independence. They need that feeling for later on when they grow up, is that they can make choices and decisions. If they don't get that feeling, then they're wishy-washy. They can't make decisions. So you'll see them sometimes, they'll be in a relationship and the guy will say, hey, would you like to go to a movie? If you want to. Well, you want to go to dinner afterwards? Yeah, it's okay. Dinner's okay. Well, what do you want to have? Well, you pick it. They just can't make a darn decision. They're just whatever, The reason for that is they didn't get that feeling when they was in the younger sense of independence. Then they get past that, and when they get to 4 to 7, they're supposed to have this feeling that's called initiative, but this is where you get imagination. And it's what it gives you is the ability to problem solve. So you'll see, like when my kids got there, some of them, they had like pet dog, they had invisible turtles, and you had to set food at the table for them. They talked to imaginary friends and all this stuff. All of that is creating this ability for creativity. They have to go through that. Then once they get into the pre-teenage years, is this sense of accomplishment. This is the feeling that you get during those 4 years by being good at something, being good for something. You need to have that feeling, I'm good at it. Well, I'm good for that. When we grew up, that's not how it was. We weren't told we were good at it. We were told we were good for nothing. And you're never going to amount to nothing. And who are you think you are gonna, and then we were raised around the reservation, and there was a lot of racism that went on there, and all this talk you can imagine between white people and Indians and the kids in the school and all that stuff. So I kind of, all six of us kids, we all grew up with this feeling that we just weren't good enough. We didn't know we grew up with that feeling, but that's just how it felt. So we wouldn't take opportunities, and we wouldn't take risks, and we wouldn't try certain things, but we didn't know that. We just thought we were just kind of dumb and stupid. Then you get into the teenage years, and this is where you get identity, where you're supposed to get this feeling of belonging. And then during these 3 years, this is where you need to answer to three questions. Who am I? Why am I? And where am I going? And you got to break away from parents again. So it drives parents nuts again. If you ever notice, like an inventory in the third column, one of the things we take a look at is my feelings of personal relationships, my personal self-esteem, because you want to know your image or your picture that you currently have, you see when you're in recovery. For this reason is if you take a thermostat and say you set 72 degrees, if it got below 72 degrees, the furnace kicks on, gets 72 degrees, it shuts off. If it gets too hot, then the air conditioner kicks on and it keeps the temperature the same about. That's the way our self-image is. When you get this picture of yourself, if you act below you, you'll do something to pick up. If you act better than you, you'll sabotage. You'll come back to do that regulating device. That's what keeps you in prison. That's what keeps you trapped, is when you have this image and things. So there's so far that's 5 feelings, and it's a feeling. It's a thing that the salmon don't have to have that. It already knows that, but it's by the experiences that we're supposed to be guided as we go through these to get these stages. Then the next stage is one of intimacy. And this isn't about sex. It's about being able to share your feelings. It's about being able to share, this is who I am, and knowing what those feelings are. Then the next feeling is one called generativity. This is a feeling that you get when you get at that age. You seem to have to be going and start to give away to keep it. You got to go and help others. Otherwise, you just don't feel, you can't be selfish no more. You want to volunteer at school or make this for somebody or help grandma or whatever. You got to have a flow going the other way. And then you get to the last feeling of the elders is integrity. And this is a feeling that by the time, if you are, it's like emotional sobriety. This is about maturing. You can have a mature 15-year-old, and you can have an immature 40-year-old who's acting like a 15-year-old because they didn't grow up. So emotional sobriety is about growing up, and how Johnny Lookercloud helped me see is that if you want to know how that's supposed to be, it's the cycle of life. There's 8 stages that you're supposed to go through, and then you'll know whether you are emotionally stable or emotional sobriety, which I didn't know, exactly what that meant. So then what I did was I said, okay, I'm going to take a look at this and I'm going to make it into step 1. I'm going to look at my unmanageability or manageability in these 8 areas. So I took the sense of trust and I made a scale on 1 to 10. 10 was high, 1 was low. And so I thought, where am I on a scale of trust, sense of trust? Honestly. And when I looked at picking a number, I was most comfortable picking the number 3. And I'm sober a long time. And I said, I can't believe you would pick a 3. But then when I started to take a look at it, now I use a system called mind mapping. Mind mapping is you draw a circle in the middle of the page, and then you draw lines out, and then you write your ideas on each of those lines. And so I started to say, all right, do you have issues of trust? And honestly, I said, you know something? I don't trust white men. And it was like I never caught into that in a set of steps the way I was doing them. And then I said, I don't trust women. Some I do, but a lot of them I don't. I don't trust the government. I wasn't working those. I don't trust myself when I take a look at, that kind of stuff. So I started to take a look at these issues that I had of mistrust, and I was only a 3. So then I went and I took a look at this feeling of making choices and decisions. How solid was I? Do I feel this freedom to make choice and decisions? There was a time when I wasn't, but I'm more comfortable with it now because you taught me how to make choices and decisions, step 10 and 11. If I'm in indecision, I pray and ask God for the right thought or action. And, so that one was different. Then I take a look at problem solving. Then I take a look at feelings of accomplishment. How am I today? Do I feel good? Am I good at being good at something? Or do I hide stuff? Do I pretend I am good at it, but I don't say it out loud? Do I take risks? Am I willing to try something new? You see, so I started to add around all 8 of these feelings. I looked at identity. I looked at intimacy. I was low on intimacy. I wasn't like how I thought when I looked at what are my issues around intimacy, and then generativity, and then the integrity. So I took step 1 and I could see a different way of looking at unmanageability. Then I took a look at white men, and then I expanded it. I says, with the white men, how are you behaving in that? Not what are they doing? I had to look at my unmanageability. Am I playing games? Do I lie to them? Do I make jokes to them when they ain't around? Do I criticize when I see them on TV? Do I think they're all like that? All men are like that? Do I maximize joy? So I had to go around there and with women to take a look at my issues with women. What's my unmanageability? I saw like I play games, I lied. I started to see, and here I'm sober a long time, and I can start to see these things. And I think what it is, I remember Johnny Looking Cloud, he had this window and he had this long bench on there, and he had river rocks on it. River rocks, they're like very flat, very round. And he painted white on one side, black on the other. And so one day I was asking about those, and he said, I mean, some were like huge, and then some maybe like big as a quarter or a dime or what, little bitty ones. And he said, when I go through the work, he said, what I think I got everything, all the big rocks. So I go to those big rocks and I turn them over and I say, good job, you got them all. Then a little time goes by and things don't seem right anymore. And he said, then when I find out those smaller rocks, I didn't see them. But now those smaller rocks are my big rocks. Then I go through the work and then all of a sudden I think I got it all. But now there's these little rocks I didn't even see the first time through. Now those little rocks are now my big rocks. And he said, this is how you can see these big rocks. He said, some of them, he said, they're hard to spot because he called it was something he called intentional neglect. And I says, what the hell is that? And he says, intentional neglect is something crops up and very quickly you just look away. You don't argue with it. You don't rationalize. You don't pretend. So it's very hard to catch an inventory because it's not in your memory. The talk about it, justifying it, it's not there, but you look just very, very quick. You just look away. And he said, that's those little rocks. Well, when I started this process of looking at cycle of life, I started to see these little rocks I never even knew I had. it just kind of busted my chops, actually, I guess is a good way to say it. I mean, there were a couple times going through it, I said, why the hell did you start this? You've been sober for 83 years, are happy. You're not sad and depressed or nothing. Now I got to look at this crap. But that's right. I have to look at this stuff because I want to grow. I want to have more of that. So then I went through all 8 of those and I used this mind map to take a look at how am I in it? What is my issues around it? Does that make some sense? So then I take that and I take that to step 2. So I take this issues around that I put a white men, women, myself, God, government, and I take it to step 2 that I rated a 3. Now I say, what would it take for me to get this to an 8 or 9 with God's help? Came to believe that a power greater than myself could. What would need to happen for me to trust white people? What would need to happen for me to trust women, to trust the government, to trust myself? And I had to really light a lot of sage and stuff to get the answers, because sometimes I don't want to. Maybe in Indian country, it wouldn't be really popular for you to start to not agree with everybody about white people, because there's a treaty in the past and all this kind of stuff is going on. Because if you have a good experience going and God helped you make one in step 2, it means you got to defend them if somebody talks against them, because now your beliefs have changed about it, if that makes some sense. So I went through all eight of those areas, bringing that to step 2, taking a look at accomplishment, and then looking at step 2, came to believe greater myself could. And what I found was, in the past, I've always done steps 1 and 2 with page 52, with that personal relationships, emotional nature. That's what I've always done before. But I found out they were covered in the cycle of life. I could say I addressed issues of personal relationships, emotional nature, making a living, in doing all of that. And so I finished going through that. It was like a beautiful pain in the rear. It's when you see stuff you've been hiding, intentional neglect, and it surfaces. Like I didn't know, long as I am sober, I didn't know that I still play games. And it was sort of like what I began to see in doing the steps 1 and 2 this way is I was able to name the game that I'm playing. Just seeing it, I didn't, but I did have a name for it. And being a Native person, there's people look at Native people in a certain way, and I can spot the ones that I used to drink free, spotting that white person that I could tell a good Native story, sob story to, shoot pool or whatever. I could spot them right away, and it's like games that we play, as I think men do, I think probably women do, I think races do, I think old people do, young people do. So doing this cycle of life this way has just been very, very revealing to me. And so I'm just coming right now, I'm taking this work now through step 6 and 7. And what I'm finding out there is I used to think that character defects worked alone, but I found out character defects work in teams. None of them go solo. You get a little bit irritated, and then it seems like irritation gets going, and it goes into this room and says, hey, anger, come on out. I think I got him going. So anger comes out with a toothpick and says, hey, what's up? And he says, well, look at this, oh yeah. hey, I think self-pity would want a chunk of this. So they go in there and, hey, self-pity, come on out. I think we got them going. And then they get self-righteous. And how long does that take? Me, like maybe 15 seconds. I can go from irritation to anger to self-pity, and I even get a resentment. I run my mouth and, whatever. So I'm seeing very subtle character defects, very slick. Because I think one trick is what I found out is in kind of closing here is I look at long-term sobriety. There's some little things that I've learned from you guys and certain meetings of certain people, but there's things like I learned is like the ego loves to analyze itself. If I'm not careful, when I take a look at what's going on with me, the ego is telling me what it is. And I believe him. And then I'm in this trap again. It's like that intentional neglect thing. Then I found out the ego works on where I have my shit together. It long-term sobriety didn't mess around with my junk that takes care of itself. It goes right where I'm supposedly hot, and that's where it works. Then another thing I learned was there's really two systems that we fight in. One is love and one is fear. There's not three systems. There's just love or fear. And when we get up in the morning, we position ourselves into the love system. And then we go and think, we do our deal. Then if something happens that we cross into the fear system, there's an indication that we're supposed to watch for. One is irritation, excite the feelings, and one is doubt. This is fear. If I sense that, what works is if I promptly recognize it. If I don't, then it goes on to anger, then it goes on to self-righteous, then it goes on to self-pity. And it takes me about 5 seconds. I had a friend of mine a while ago, he made me a 10-step bracelet. And on that bracelet, he wrote, the first 5 seconds are golden. And what that meant was promptly in 10-step is what I was supposed to do when I felt irritation or doubt. I was supposed to put my hand on that bracelet so that I didn't let that irritation build a team of character defects. Otherwise, I'd be making amends and all that other stuff, to catch it right away. Then what they showed me was over in the fear system is this round disc, and the name of that disc is called pause. So if I'm in the fear and I catch it, then I'm to step on this pause, this disc. And when I'm on there, it's different than fear. I'm in what did they say when we play kids game? There's a place that was safety, you touched it, nobody could touch you. That's the way this disc is. You pause, then you ask for the right thought or action, then that disc just floats on back through the fear system over to the love system and get you back to, where you're supposed to be. And so I found this. I'm not through it all. I don't know how amends is going to come out, in all of this. I'm doing this thing with these subtle character defects, in 6 and 7, looking at the cycle of life piece. It's not an ending thing. The cycle of life is, it doesn't matter if you're red, yellow, black, or white, you're gonna have a cycle of life, and there's this order. How do you have emotional sobriety if you're gay? How about that one? Well, the cycle of life also applies, I think also doesn't matter. It's a human being. So you take a look at what is your sense of trust? And how are your choices and decisions? And how's your accomplishment, So it seems that this is a human thing. And to me, I've been satisfied going through it that I have not left the process of the steps. I'm looking at unmanageability. I'm looking at powerlessness, and I'm just doing it. I think we all we search for things. I was fortunate enough to run into a person who suggested, that I look at steps 1 and 2 through the cycle of life. I'm even doing inventory now. I did inventory in cycle of life. I did baby, youth, adult, elder, and then I drew like 4-year cycles, and I take a look at what happened to you when you was 4 to 7, what happened to you when you was 8 to 12, what happened to you with a teenager, what happened to you. And one of the things that has come up that a lot of Native people might experience, maybe Blacks do, but this thing on this intergenerational trauma. We now know that the stress of our ancestors and what they went through, the emotional stress, it's actually recorded in a layer of your DNA. And when they make a baby, you can actually have stress that you are working, emotional things you are working through based on something happened to your grandpa and grandma. Because it's transferred down to the, so I think that it happened with the Irish, I found this time through probably one of the more revealing things when I got to the inventory doing it this way, is I found out the damage of early childhood trauma, things that happened to me when I was very, very young, or things that I saw. I never saw those things really in normal things. I was doing the 12 steps the other way, but I've had a lot of tears come just with something popping up, that I didn't necessarily even know was inside of myself. And I think there's this, I think sometimes what I've done, even in sobriety, is I pretended something didn't hurt. And if you pretend something that doesn't hurt, that thing is not going to heal. That's just kind of the way the deal is, we're supposed to be strong women and strong men and all this other stuff, whatever that is. But I think when pretending is a way of hiding, it's a way of avoiding, and this darn cycle of life stuff, it's just surfacing that kind of stuff for me. And it's just like one of these beautiful pains in the rear is all I can say about it. So I like this format, is I can share my latest, this is my experience so far. I like how, I think it was Mary there, I heard say one time, you share your experience, strength, and hope. You don't share your theory, strength, and hope. You don't share your hypothesis, strength, and hope. You share, if you've done it, you can share it. You've gone through that. So and I like your format. I don't have to be through everything it's okay for me to be halfway through this stuff and share it, here the best that I can. So with that, I'll just kind of close, right there. It's a little bit different. There is if you want to see a lot of the real good details for the cycle of life, there's a website called Sobriety.com. Then when that screen comes up, there's a thing called Sobriety Teachings. Then it'll bring up some videos, and just look for the cycle of life, emotional sobriety. And that tells all 8 of these feelings in great detail on how they fit. What does it mean? So that's there. All right. That's all I got to share for this part.
Oh my goodness, Don. Thank you so much. My God, I don't even know what to say. Thank you for that. That was incredible. Wow. I just learned so much, and I can't wait to listen to that again. And I have to say, when this meeting started, I was like jumping out of my seat. I was so nervous, and just your energy and your voice, like I feel so calm now. I wish I could carry that in with me, but I'm sure I'll wake up in fear tomorrow, but now I know what to do. So I know that you have many friends in this meeting. Would you like to call on a couple people?
Yeah, and then I don't know if anybody, maybe I'll ask you is there's that format on a scale of 1 to 10 for step 1 and step 2. I don't know if anybody would be interested in having that format, or you can just make up their own. Am I able to get it to you and you can post it or something?
Sure, yes. And I wanted to apologize too. I didn't know that you had a screen share. I can make you a co-host now. Is there anything that you would like to share from your screen to the group right now?
I can. I can just.
Do you want me to do that?
Yeah, let's do that while
Okay.
we're talking or
Hold
whatever.
on. Okay, so you should be able.
Okay. Well, let's let me see. No, this isn't the one. Let me pick the right one.
Yeah, we saw it.
It's one called step 1 and step 2. What does this mean?
We see some weird Zoom page is what we see.
Oh, I was trying to get to my desktop. Let me see real quick if
You have to open the document and then try to share it.
oh, is that okay? Let me do
Now
that.
you have to open the document and then when you go to share it, it'll bring up the Zoom share screen and then it'll show, you can see the document in there that you want to share.
That's it there. So then I do share screen. Okay, so this right here is what I want to give everybody. Am I able to copy? Is this like 6 slides or something like that? Is there a way I can?
That's okay. Whatever you want to do.
How do I do that?
Oh, can somebody techie assist?
Hi, he might need to save it in Zoom to his pictures.
Oh,
if you bring it up on the screen, Dawn, I can take a screenshot of it and put it in the chat.
oh, you
Or maybe
can.
he can email it to one of you guys, whoever
No,
can
we
get
can see
that.
it, Don. Don, we can see your slides.
Oh. Now how would I give this to you? All it shows like I think I talked about.
Just double click on it and make it big.
Yeah,
One at
Yeah,
a
each of
time.
them. Yes.
Whichever one you want to show us.
I'd like to give them all.
Okay.
so what we have done in the past, Dawn, is have, if you would like, I can put my email address or Sarah's email address in the chat. And you can send the document to us, and then anybody that wants to be able to pick it up, we can give it to them via email if they
Oh.
email.
Okay,
How's that for a choice?
that'll work for me.
Do you want me, Don, another thing I can do to make your life a lot easier, do you want me just to touch base with your assistant tomorrow? Would you be able to give that to her and she can give it to me?
I'll send you some free books if you can do that. Yes, that would be
Do you want me?
wonderful.
Okay, I'll do that. I'll call her tomorrow.
Okay,
Thank you. And then everybody, I'm going to put my email address in the chat. So just shoot me an email if you want a copy. Okay. Thank you,
all right. Well,
Don.
thank you for helping with that.
Thank you both.
So The
I'm
first-
sorry, what is the name of the lady who said, who's the leading the meeting? Is it Emerson? Who do I email to get the materials?
In the chat right now, you can see that there's
I'm typing
two
it right
people-
now.
2 people have
Okay,
sent the screenshot already.
Oh,
So in the chat. So go to the second one, Don. We'll keep putting it in the chat.
all right.
Thank you.
okay.
Does anybody else have any other questions right now for Dawn?
Okay, there's a second one.
Done.
There's a third one.
Done.
Wow, there's the next one.
Done.
Okay, there's one, there's the next one.
It's done, Don.
Okay, this is the mind mapping. So for step 1,
Done.
and then this is where you take the same word and then you make the mind map for step 2.
Gotcha.
All right, thank you for doing that.
No problem. I'm gonna put it all in the chat now.
All right, thank you for that.
Of course.
Okay. And I'm starting to get hammered with chats with your email addresses. I'm going to ask that you please email me that. My email address is in there. It's sboardvt@gmail.com. Tomorrow, I'm going to get a copy of this from Don's assistant, and I will reply to you with the materials. So if that's okay. Thank you.
Yeah, and if there's any questions, if somebody's going to try to do step 1, step 2 this way, my email is don@whitebison.org. If you have any questions about this process, I can maybe help with it. All right.
Geez, thank you so much again.
All right. So what now is questions or something?
So would you like to call on anyone, or does anybody have a question for Dawn? I see a hand raised. Loretta T. Wait, you're on mute.
Yes.
There you are.
Hi, I'm Loretta and I'm an alcoholic. Hi, Dawn. How are you?
I'm fine.
Do you remember who I am?
You look familiar.
All right. So I'll tell you. Colorado, Joe Hawk,
Oh,
Mark Houston.
oh, yeah.
You came to Queens. You
Uh-huh.
said, what is this? You didn't like the Queens meeting? I mean, Big Frank, when you was talking about your sponsor, Frank, was that Big Frank?
Yes, it was.
Okay, so we
Frank McKibben.
sat down with Big Frank and his little wife and all the rest of them, Don Pritz and all the rest of them in a room when I first came to Colorado. And they and you and all the rest of them taught me and my husband. And then we went around with Joe Hawk and he came to New York and we went to Colorado. We used to go to Colorado every year so that they could teach us stuff, because they took us into their rooms and they taught us and taught us and taught us. Do you remember?
I remember those days. Yep.
And every time I see you and listen to you talk, I remember those days.
Yep.
So tonight, I have really enjoyed just listening to you. Of course, I have your book, Sobriety. I also have the workbook to Sobriety. I have the circular wheels, or what you call that. I have that. And then you was talking about the 4 seasons. You have taught me so many things that my friends know how I feel about you. So when they saw the flyer, they sent it to me so that I would know about this meeting, so that I could get on this meeting just to see you.
Oh, nice. Thank you.
Thank you for letting me share.
All right, Loretta.
Where is it?
Thank you so much, Loretta. And did anybody else want to share or have a question for Dawn?
Hi, my name is Marta. I'm an alcoholic. I want to share really quick. Thank you so much.
Okay.
I've been coming to this meeting and you know, you helped me so much today because I didn't grow up with this. I didn't have the cycle of life either. And I'm sober now, but you know, I have 2 kids and I feel like what you talked about really impacted me today. And I even had my husband, who's not an alcoholic, listen, because it's good to have that compass when you're bringing up children in today's world, because I can focus with them, you know, pressure him on doing schoolwork or doing this, doing that, and not tending to these precious you know, things that a child has to go through, because I didn't. And you know, I feel so grateful to have heard you, and you know, I just feel like being such a part of this community of AA, who is teaching me these important things through the steps, so I can then pass it to my children. So I really appreciate it. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
I'm
Thank you so
Joanne,
much,
I'm an
Marta.
alcoholic and I look like a dog, but I'm actually a human being, believe it or not. So, thank you so much, Don, for your chair. I really appreciated hearing what you had to say. And one of the things which I really liked is that you, and I've seen that in people who really get this recovery thing, is that they make the steps their own. You didn't regurgitate exactly what it was, what you know, you made this your own and you have a method to work it. And that I really like, because that's really important, I think. We don't do the steps until we've digested them. It's like eating a sandwich. They're not your cells or your blood until you digest it. And I feel the same about the steps. So yes, we do the same things in a way, but making them our own is also, I think, very important. And I've seen people that have long-term sobriety, that's what they do. They make it subtly their own, these steps. And I think that's really important. So thank you, Don.
All right, thank you.
Okay, thank you. It looks like we have time for one more. Is it okay if I call on Kurt? Kurt Z, would you be willing to share?
Yeah, Kurt, alcoholic. Thanks, Don. Thanks for your words and your time. I think of, when I think of well-briety, I think of emotional sobriety. You know, it's not just the word, I guess, is what, you know, it resonates with me. It's not sobriety, it's well-briety. I think it's pointing towards that. And I was trying to think, how can I articulate my experience with this in relationship to like the teachings? And you know, I had to change my relationship. That's not the right way to say it. The relationship that I had with the condition had to be changed. And one of the ways that happened was I drank at 19 years, and part of that surrender process, the awareness to see what was happening in 19 years was available. And what it looked like was I was identified as the condition. And, you know, we do another little meeting where we repeat this every time in the meeting. It says, being convinced that self manifested in various ways is what defeated us. And I was always identified as the self. And for some reason, when that release experience happened, I saw that this was the condition, it wasn't me. And so, you know, I've said this before, I think, in this meeting, and it was the way I was profoundly moved by this. Suddenly, I realized what the matter was when I read this, you know. like, that's a revelatory experience. That's like that's not just, oh, I figured it out. You know, it's suddenly I realized what the matter was. My basic flaw had always been dependence, almost absolute dependence on people's circumstances to supply me with prestige, security, and the like, the things you talked about. Failing to get these things according to my perfectionist dreams and specifications, I'd fought for them. When defeat came, so did my depression. So we changed the way we read it because it makes more sense to me this way. Self's basic flaw had always been dependence, almost absolute dependence on people and circumstances to supply self with prestige, security, and the like. Failing to get these things according to self's perfectionist dreams and specifications, self had fought for them. And when defeat came, so did depression. So I wasn't identified as the condition anymore. And when I wasn't identified as the condition, the possibility to be free from the condition became available. It was never available before. And so I think it changed the whole way I responded to life based on the practices you taught me. And, you know, like you said, Gary mentioned it last week, the power of the pause. I don't think Gary said last week, the power of me pausing. That's not what he said. He said the power of the pause. And it gave me, you know, I mean, I see it as like the position of neutrality, you know, that disc. And one of the things that was really helpful for me was when you talked about that with me, you said something, you used an analogy of a street and the curbs in the street. And you use that analogy. That was very helpful because I see in pictures. So, you know, I'm in the street, and then when I hit the curb, it's agitation or doubt, whichever side of the street I'm on. And it's a corrective measure, right? So it all tied into the step work, but that never made sense before. It just never made sense. So I just think the importance of this being a way of living, a practice, is crucial. It's not, you can know this stuff. I mean, I knew a lot of stuff in the first 19 years, but I still had fear. I still had agitation all the time. I still had mental anxiety. I was still listening to a narrative in my head that was creating things that weren't happening. See, I still had all that. And that caused me to react rather than be able to respond. And so I'm really grateful for you, and we love you, buddy. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Kurt. Thank you. And thank you, Don. What a wonderful meeting. Thank you, everyone who came tonight and new people to this meeting. Hope to see you again. We have a way of closing this meeting. We stay muted and we go into our inner rooms and say a prayer of our choice. And then if you'd like, come back and thank our wonderful speaker. Thank you again so much.